Good afternoon, everybody. So this is one of the events we're putting on in the department oriented around careers, just looking at different routes to the kind of life that you might lead when you actually leave the institution of the university. So I'm very pleased today that we've got Perry Marshall to speak to us. There's not a lot you can say. Well, there's so many things that you can say about what Perry does, actually. The wealth of his expertise, sales and marketing in particular, in the context of the internet age. But there's much more to Perry than that. He's also written a book on evolution. And his ideas on evolution are actually attracting attention from the University of Oxford. They're co-sponsoring a prize to look at solving some of the challenges associated with evolution. So his expertise, his range of experience is truly vast. But he's here today to talk to us about his business expertise. And I'm going to, without any further ado, hand over to Perry. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Glad you guys are here. What I'm going to talk to you about today, if you really pay close attention, it might be the most important thing you learned this semester. It might even be the most important thing you learned in your entire college career. It's that powerful. Who am I? I'm from Chicago. I have a wife and 6 kids, 2 of them adopted from China. And people in the States and around the world know me as the guy that wrote the world's best-selling book on internet advertising. I wrote the world's best-selling book on Google advertising, Ultimate Guide to Google AdWords, and also the world's best-selling book on Facebook advertising, Ultimate Guide to Facebook advertising. But the real secret sauce behind those books and behind what I teach in those venues and those topics is the 80-20 principle. Now, how many of you could tell me exactly what the 80-20 principle is? All right. When?
80% of your business comes from 80% of your customers. And likewise, this ratio applies to many.
Yes, that's right. So the 80-20 principle says it's true of customers, but it's really true of a lot of things. It says that 80% of causes are caused. 80% of effects come from 20% of causes, and 20% of effects come from 80% of causes. It means that 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. It means 80% of your profits come from 20% of your product line. It means that 80% of the traffic in this room is on 20% of the carpet, which you can see when you look at the dirt. It means that 80% of the space on your hard drive is taken by 20% of the files. 80% of the texts are with 20% of the people that you're friends with. This is true across the board. And if you understand this very deeply, you'll find this is a huge shortcut to all kinds of things: getting jobs, starting companies, managing your time. So I want to tell you a little bit of my story here. So this is me 20 years ago. This is my daughter, Tana. And when when my wife was 3 months pregnant with her, I got laid off of my engineering job, and I had to go find a new one. And so wife is 3 months pregnant. I just lost my job. I'm 26 years old. What am I going to do? And I looked around in engineering. I couldn't find anything, so I went into technical sales. And I had 2 years of bologna sandwiches and ramen soup. It was great. And peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And another good one, when you're poor, baked potatoes and salsa. That's a good one. So this was our life. And I went into sales, and I had a rude awakening. I thought, well, I'm an engineer. I'm pretty smart. I think I'm smarter than these guys. This shouldn't be too hard. And So what I'm going to talk to you about today with 80-20 is what I wish somebody would have told me back then. When I didn't know how to go out there and get a customer. I didn't know how to go out there and get an order. And you understand, no matter what you do in your life, you have to sell. Because selling is really nothing more than getting people to cooperate with you or buy into your ideas. You know, if you could have the world's best education, you could have PhDs and all the rest, but if you can't sell your ideas to other people, it doesn't matter, okay? Getting a scientific paper published in a journal is an act of selling, okay? So this is me with my baby girl, Tana, who's now 21. She's with us on this trip. In fact, this is my son, Xander, he's 13. She took him to Paris the other day while my brother and I did some other stuff. So I want to tell you a story about 80-20. So this guy that you see, this is John Paul Mendoza. John's a good friend of mine and a mentor. When John was 17 years old, he dropped out of high school, hitchhiked from Denver to Las Vegas, and became a professional gambler. This was what he wanted to do. His mother was not very happy about this. In fact, his mother went to early mass every day just to pray for him and light candles so that he didn't get killed, okay? So he's in Vegas, living by his wits, playing poker for a living, and he's like, you know, this is harder than I thought it was going to be, okay? And he goes to a bookstore with gambling books, and he's looking at gambling books in the bookstore, and he meets this other guy in the bookstore, and he finds out this other guy named Rob runs a professional gambling ring. And he's like, hey, do you think you could teach me what you do? And he's like, well, for a percentage of your winnings, I could teach you what we do. And so they agree, and they shake on it. And as soon as they shake hands, he says, jump in the Jeep, John, we're going for a ride. And so they leave, they get in the Jeep, they're riding down the highway, and John says, so how do I win more poker games? And Rob says, the way you win poker games is you play people who are going to lose. And those people are called marks. You don't want to play like the other professional poker player. You want to play the guy from Wichita, Kansas that just got his grandmother's inheritance money, that flew to Las Vegas, and he thinks he's going to get rich, and he doesn't know anything. Like, that's the guy. And John says, okay, so where do I find that guy? Where do I find Marks? And he goes, here, I'll show you. And he pulls into a parking lot, and they go into a strip club. And there's women and music and rock and roll and people drinking and bikers, and it's like 120 decibels because it's throbbing with loud music. And Rob sits John down at a table, and Rob carried a sawed-off shotgun everywhere he went. And he pulls a sawed-off shotgun out of his jacket, and he holds it under the table, and he opens the chamber, and he goes, shh, he racks it. And some dangerous looking characters around the room turn around like, hey, what was that? And the owner comes over and he goes, is everything okay over here, boys? He goes, everything's just fine, teaching the lad a lesson. I'm not going to start any fights or anything. Don't worry about us. We're okay. And he says to John, did you see those people that looked up when I made that noise? And he goes, yeah. And he says, don't play poker with them. They're not marks. You play poker with everybody else. Okay? Now, that is in marketing, in sales, in business, that is what I call rack the shotgun, and that is 80-20. You send a signal, 80% ignore it, 20% don't, and that tells you, it divides the room into who's paying attention and who's oblivious, who cares and who doesn't. Okay? And it's always the minority who notice. It's always the minority who pay attention. Okay? And those are the ones that matter. Okay? And everything you do in business, everything you do in sales and in marketing and in life is racking the shotgun. Okay? You sent the email. Who opened the email and who didn't? Rack the shotgun. Who clicked on the link in the email and didn't? Rack the shotgun. Who signed up to come to your little event? Rack the shotgun. Who saw the poster for Perry Marshall's talk and who actually showed up? Rack the shotgun. This is going on all the time. Okay? Now, if John wanted to take people on a skeet shooting retreat or maybe do some drug deals, he would pick the guys that turned around when they heard that noise, right? And if John wants to play poker with people that aren't street smart, he picks everybody else. Okay? And so what you want to do in your life is rack the shotgun, and it's not about caring who said yes or who said no, or who turned their head or didn't. It's who noticed it, because now you're living in the is world instead of the should be world. Because 80-20 is about the is world. So, if you understand 80-20, you'll make more money with less effort. You'll get more results with less time. You will simplify your life. You'll reduce the noise and clutter, and you will accelerate your career. So I want to talk to you about how this works. So 80-20 says that whether we're talking about going to the beach with a bucket and carrying home a bucket of sand, or whether we're talking about the size of craters on the moon, or if we're talking about the size of files on our hard drive, or we're talking about 70,000 items in a giant grocery store and which ones sell and which ones don't, that all of it is 80-20. Like the size of the sand grains in our bucket of sand is 80-20. 20% of the sand grains take 80% of the space. 80% of the sand grains take 20% of the space. It's a law of physics. Now, the 80-20 principle came from a guy named Pareto 100 years ago. He's an Italian economist, and he figured out that whether he was growing peas, if he was growing peas, 20% of the seeds made 80% of the peas. In real estate, 20% of the people owned 80% of the real estate. No matter what country he went to, whether they were socialist, capitalist, communist, it didn't matter, 20% of the people had 80% of the money. Why? Because it's a law of physics. So people complain about inequality. Inequality is built into the laws of the universe. You're not going to legislate it away. You're not going to change it. You can only work with it. You have to live in the is world instead of the should be world. Now, here's what's really interesting about 80-20 though. There's an 80-20 inside every 80-20. And another one, and another one. Okay, so not only do 20% of your customers spend 80% of the money, 20% of the 20% spend 80% of the 80%. So that means 4% spend 64%. That means 20% of the 20% of the 20% spend 80 of the 80 of the 80. So that means 1% of the people spend 50% of the money. Okay? It's true again. 0.2% of the people spend 40% of the money. 0.04% spend 30% of the money. This is always true. So this means in every business, in every career, in every calendar, every schedule, every list of text messages, every stack of emails, 1% of what is there controls 50% of all the outcomes. Okay, so that means you can ignore 90% of what goes on. And if you pick the right 10% to concentrate on, you'll get more done than you would ever accomplish if you tried to pay attention to all of it. So, most people treat their customers like they're all equal. Like, you know, all those guys there. But this is the reality of customers, that one guy is important as 2 of these guys, which is important as 4 of these, which is important as 8 of these, which is important as 16 of these. This is how customers actually are. So if you're treating everybody equally, you're leaving all kinds of money on the table. So 80-20 applies to revenue, time vampires, people that like clamp down on your neck and suck your time. Okay? Insurance claims, size of claims, disputes, breaking of laws. 20% of the criminals break 80% of the laws. The expense of acquiring customers, days hospitalized, size of clients, cost of prescriptions, time spent on a website, emails, phone calls, all this stuff. It's all 80-20. Now, you've all seen this, right? You're in school, you see these bell curves. And so everybody takes a test and the average is 77%. This is the wrong thing to look at. It's totally the wrong thing to look at. Because what's average almost never matters. The average doesn't matter. Let me show you what matters. Let's take this. So 100 kids took a science test, and the bell curve distribution, the average was 77%. That doesn't tell you what you need to know. This is what you need to know. 100 kids took a science test. This is how good they all are in science. Okay? It looks like this. So, there's all these people, most of the people that took the science test, they have a moderate ability to do science, okay? And the best one has more science horsepower than the bottom 80 combined. And if you're trying to guess who's going to be a Nobel Prize winner, or who's going to make some big discovery, or who's going to invent something, it's like one of these 2 or 3 people right here. And you can ignore everybody else. If you put 80-20 on a graph, this is what it looks like. And this curve, it zooms up so fast, it never touches the right side, it's an asymptote, but it goes up, 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 super fast. Okay, so that's the 80-20 squared, the 80-20 cubed at the far extreme. Now, let me show you how accurate this is. So this is what I call the 80-20 curve, and I have a website, 8020curve.com, where you can plug in numbers. So here's what I did. I said, let's say you read in the newspaper that Southwest Airlines is the number 171 company in the Fortune 500, and they're doing $13 billion of sales. You can use 80-20 to predict the size of every other company in the Fortune 500. Let me show you how accurate it is. So that yellow mark is number 171, and this here is $13 billion. Okay? So, and this is the theoretical 80-20 curve. This is the actual. So you see this yellow line? It's kind of squiggly, and you see the white one? This is the actual revenues of the Fortune 500. So if you know the revenue of one company in the Fortune 500, you can predict how big is number 5, number 10, number 30, number 50, number 100, and you'll be right within about 15%. This is also true of the size of files in your hard drive. It's also true of grains of sand in a bucket of sand. This will be true. It's true all over economics. It's true all over banking. It's true everywhere. So this is like the biggest simplification that I've ever seen. This is the Forbes 400 on a 70-30 curve. By the way, 80-20, it's the 80 and the 20 are not a rigid law. Sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 90-10. And I won't go into why that is, but there's always this symmetrical inequality. This is the population of cities in the U.S. This is donations to a church on a Sunday morning. This is the dairy output of 38 counties in Wisconsin. Okay, it's everywhere. It's all around you all the time. Now, you can apply this to time. So you go get a job somewhere and they pay you like 10 pounds an hour or 20 pounds an hour. Sorry, all my examples in dollars because I'm a, uncircumcised Philistine American, so you'll just have to, put up with me. But somebody gives you a job and they pay you 15 pounds an hour. And you think of it as like, well, okay, so here I am, 15 pounds an hour. It's a pound every 4 minutes. And you think it's all equal. It's not equal, okay? So there's like $10 an hour jobs, running errands, organizing your office, cold calling, talking to unqualified prospects on a sales doing your expense reports, okay? But then there's $100 an hour jobs, solving a problem for a prospective customer, talking to a person that you know is likely to buy because you've racked the shotgun, okay? Writing an email to prospects or customers, creating marketing tests or experiments, $1,000 an hour, planning and prioritizing your day. If you sit down for 5 minutes or 10 minutes at the beginning of your day and you map it out, what do I really want to accomplish today? What's the 20% of what's on my plate that's going to produce 80% of the results, and what else can I ignore? That's $1,000 an hour work for a few minutes of your time. Building a sales funnel, negotiating with somebody who's going to buy there's a lot of leverage in negotiation. You spend an extra 5 minutes and you're selling your car and you get an extra 500 pounds for your car. Well, if 5 minutes, 500 pounds, that's 6,000 pounds an hour that you made doing 5 minutes of extra negotiation. There's even $10,000 an hour work. Taking a business and improving, making a newer, better offer, repositioning your message and position. Even a $20 an hour person makes at least $1,000 an hour at least 1 minute every day. Think of it like this. Let's say you work at a dentist. And the dentist, a customer calls up and they want a crown or some kind of expensive dental work. But somebody puts them on hold and they're listening to hold music for 2 minutes and then they hang up. Okay? They lost a $3,000 procedure in 2 minutes of hold music. So how many thousands of pounds per hour got lost? Tens of thousands of pounds per hour during the 2 minutes. So even the $20 an hour person has $1,000 an hour moments in their day. If the secretary always answers the phone and always handles it correctly, they could screw everything else up and spend most of their time on Facebook, but as long as they did the right things at the right time, they would be worth way more than what they're paid. So, if you do 80-20, here's what it feels like. I'm always neglecting something. That's because you are. You should neglect 50 to 80% of the things you think you're supposed to do. You should never finish 100% of what's on your to-do list. If you do, you did it wrong. Now, this is hugely relieving if you can get rid of the guilt. Because one thing on the to-do list is more important than all the other stuff put together. A question you should ask should be, what one thing, if I got done today, would justify me taking the rest of the day off? It's very productive laziness. Okay, perfectionism. 80-20 says good enough is good enough. 80-20 says yes, 1 or 2 or 5% of what you do has to be perfect. 80% of what you do should never be perfect. You buy an album, it has 10 songs. How many of those songs need to be perfect? 2. Because there might be 2 hits. The rest of it, the fans will like them whether they did a good job or not, frankly. That's how it works, okay? Being 80-20 means making space. Most people have no space to think, no space to meditate, no space to reflect. The worst way to start your day, is on a smartphone or a computer, an email box, or social media. Now, most people wake up in the morning, they open their eyes, they look at the ceiling, their arm reaches over, they pull a device in front of their face, and they start getting stimulated. That is the worst way to start your day. Now, here's how I start my day. No phone. I pull out a notebook. I go, okay, cup of tea, notebook, pen or pencil, good morning, some gratitude, some prayer, some meditation. What's important today? What am I thankful for today? What could I do today? What one thing would be so valuable I could take the rest of the day off? And what 10 things can I have somebody else do, not do, ignore, delegate, whatever? And then after I've got my thoughts down and cleared my head, written down inspirations that happened in the shower, because a lot of that happens, then at some point you jump into your day. Okay, now I open my email box. Now I engage with the rest of the world, but you have your protected space. That is one of the best 80-20 habits you could possibly cultivate. And if you do this, if you leave this room and you go, that's how I'm going to start my day every day, even if it's just 10 minutes, I promise you have the 10 minutes. You can afford the 10 minutes, you can spare the 10 minutes. Every day I'm going to have at least 10 minutes of protected space where nobody's pounding into my little eggshell, and I'm going to think and prioritize. Your day will be vastly more productive, and you'll earn the space that you need in order to say no to all these other things. Now, I have a special guest for you. A surprise, unannounced bonus. Bob Skinstad is a former professional rugby player from South Africa. And Bob is also a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur. Bob, I want you to come in here and talk for about 5 minutes about how you used 80-20 in rugby and then ping over into how you use it in business. So give this guy a hand.
Thanks very much, Perry. Good day, everybody. It's a bit of a funny one because we'll get onto networks and some of the stuff that Perry's talking about. We met today for the first time. I've read all of his books. Who else who's heard of Richard Koch, who also wrote 80-20 Principle? Perry and him have collaborated. Tim Ferriss talks in all of his books about the 80-20 principle, the Pareto principle. 20 years ago, I picked up the first book by Richard Koch about the 80-20 principle. I was a professional sportsman. I'd been traveling the world. We were playing in Russia and Romania and France on a tour. At the airports, I picked up the book. Literally out of the blue. I said, how does this work? I kept it with me. I played professional sport for 13 years. The most pivotal moment in my whole career was reading that book and understanding that everything he was talking about could apply to me in what we were doing in professional sport. In fact, I was a really young captain of a team, and I went to the coach. I was like, you're not going to believe this, and sport was in that transition from amateur to professional. In South Africa, we only recently moved to professional. It was post 1995. It was about 1997, 98. I went to the coach, and he was a retired lawyer, a very smart guy, but just loved the game. So he sort of retired and then coached. And I said to him, this is happening. We've got 3 amazing guys in our team of 15, and they're not getting the ball enough. We need them to get the ball at crucial periods of the game, and we mapped it out. We mapped a matrix of who should be getting the ball at what time in the game. We had the best season we'd ever had, qualified top of the log. I ended up playing for South Africa for 13 years, won a World Cup with South Africa, literally using the right guys in the right position. But much more importantly is that Perry's opening gambit to you guys is that this principle and the way you take it on board could be the most important thing you ever do. I went through a career of rugby, and like I said, because I was amateur at the time, I also found other things to do. So I was at Stellenbosch University. I started a business, bought a pub in my little hometown. Not quite with sawn off shotguns and that kind of thing, but not that exciting. But I bought a little pub. We expanded the business to 7 or 8, had a hotel eventually, sold that, put that money into a VC firm, and I've moved over to the UK. I've been here 3 years. I run the small cap venture capital part of that firm. It's called Knife Capital. We've got quite a few exits out of South Africa. Every single one that's worked has used the 80-20 principle. Every single one that's been well due diligenced, well led by a great entrepreneur, has been able to find the inflection point. Where could we improve this business by doing the 20% of things that affect the 80% of causes? It's literally, I wake up every day and reach for the smartphone. I wish I could say to Perry I don't, and I know I should change it. But the email list comes in, and I know which companies I've got to deal with because they're doing the 80-20 of their business wrong. And I know which companies I don't have to deal with because they could literally tell you where it's going right and going wrong. So to finish off, I mean, this is just a validation for me. It's a great opportunity. My personal network is big because of sport. Small in the business world, but growing. I reach out to people. I've reached out to Perry. I've reached out to Tim Ferriss before. I've met with those individuals. They've touched my career more than any course I've ever done. Any business or anything. Just the fact that they can simplify and clarify the little bits that make the biggest difference. I'll tell you one story. So moving out of rugby, I'd worked out that those 3 guys needed to get the ball more. We got into the pub business, and I think I told you the story. Perry, I bought this pub with an ongoing, it was a going concern. We had a management team in there, and one of the items on the menu, which was a 36-page menu, was a tomato tart. So when I talk to kids at the university that I went to, which is the University of Stellenbosch in Cape Town, I talk about teamwork and a tomato tart. Now, I've never eaten a tomato tart. We had it on our menu. I think we sold 3 per year. We did the study of how much space in our kitchen, the ingredients, the preservative-orientated ingredients of a tomato tart took. It took about a square meter. We had about a 20 square meter kitchen. Okay, so for literally 0.0001% of revenue, we had a huge percentage of our space taken up. It led us to rejig the menu. We went from 36 pages to 1. We spent 4 months just literally taking the slips and working out what people were eating on the menu and their contributions to revenue, changed the entire restaurant menu, expanded from 1 shop to 7 over 18 months. They hadn't got out of that town for the 10 years before that they'd owned it. And it literally, for me, is an example you can use anywhere. Which parts of your day, which 1 minute, $1,000 an hour part of your day is affecting you the most. And to be honest, I'm going to jump off now, Perry. What a great privilege, but I'm learning more over there than I am when I'm talking. So thank you very much for having me. It's great.
Thank you. Who's the fix a restaurant guy from America? I forget his name. They bring him in. He has a reality TV show. Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay says that the way you make your restaurant famous in your town is you have one dish that's amazing. Not 36 pages of menu, where you do 186 different food items in a mediocre way. It's like if you have an Italian restaurant and your lasagna is awesome, that is what's going to fill your restaurant. And so 80-20 is no. 80-20 is saying no to 80% of all the stuff out there that you can't do well. Even if you did it well, it wouldn't matter that all. The tomato tart, I'm sure, was great. And they sold 3 of them a year. So I'm going to wrap up really really quickly. So one of the things that 80/20 gives you is it says since 1% of the customers want to give you 50% of the money, since money is burning a hole in their pocket, you have to give them an opportunity. And I call this the principle of the $2,700 espresso machine. And 80/20 says that for every 1,000 people who buy let's go pounds, a 5-pound latte, for every 1,000 people who do that, one will spend $2,700 on something. And if you have a stainless steel gleaming espresso machine over in the corner with a little halogen light shining on it, 1 out of 1,000 people will buy it. And then you know what they'll do the next day? They'll open the box, they'll put it on the counter, and they'll come back to Starbucks and buy another latte because they have the unscratchable itch. And I call that the hyper-responsive customer. You can have a business with 1,000 customers, but if you scratch the unscratchable itch of the top 10 customers, you'll make more money than you will dealing with the other 990. This may be completely necessary just to get a coffee shop to work, just to stay open. You probably have to do this. So I'm gonna wrap up here. I'm just gonna tell you something you can do here. If you go to, I have a special offer. So on Amazon, I think for 15 or 20 pounds, I don't know the exact amount, you can go buy the book 80/20 Sales and Marketing on Amazon. But if you go to perrymarshall.com/80/20, you can get it for free plus $14 shipping, and you get extra videos and bonuses and little cheat sheets included with it that you don't get when you buy the regular book just from Amazon. And so if you're in any kind of sales or marketing or business profession, this book will change your life, and will show you how to apply it to your time, to your resources, to employees, to hiring, firing, Facebook traffic, Google traffic, all that kind of stuff. So that's all I got. Let's open it up for questions, and I really appreciate being able to speak at King's College today. Thank you. So who's got a burning question? Yes?
What takes up most of my time, even when I'm trying to do really important things like procrastination? What is your top tip for being able to focus on the really important things from that?
Okay, so anything that you do, there's time in and then there's results out. And so the way I do it is, so you make your to-do list. We can all come up with like 6 or 8 or 11 or 19 things that we're supposed to do today. And some of them are mandatory. Like, I do have to put on my clothes today, and I do have to get out of bed, and I do have to put petrol in my car or whatever, okay? But you have to know that no matter what the list is, that the value of the things on that list looks like this. That let's say this is 10 things on my list, you can be absolutely sure that 1 or 2 of them are more valuable to you and more productive than the other 8 combined. In fact, the 20% are 16 times more important than the 80%. So if the 20% produces 80 and the 80 produces 20, the difference in productivity between the two groups is 16 to 1. So you make your list of 10 things, you circle the top 2. Chances are the top 2 are worth, in the long run, whether it's in money or career advancement or whatever, they're worth 10 to 20 times more than the other 8 put together. It's almost always true. You just have to really think about what does that mean and what is your outcome. So maybe your outcome is income. Maybe your outcome is getting into graduate school. Well, if you wanted to get into graduate school, 5% of what you do in undergrad school controls 50% of the outcome. It's probably like one project that you work on that makes a professor in the graduate school interested in you. He doesn't care about the sociology or anthropology class he took, but if you're in chemistry and you did this really interesting project, it's that one project. And so people think they have to get a 4.0 or a 3.5 or something like, no, well, not really. Do really awesome work in this one area. George Church is a friend of mine. He's the #1 geneticist at Harvard and MIT. And he's on the judging panel of a $5 million prize that I organized. He was studying, I think, at Duke. He got thrown out of Duke graduate school because he was either flunking some class or ignoring some class. But he was working on this really cool project that eventually made him world famous. Okay, now, what this tells you is, now, like the mentality in school and academia is, you got to get straight A's, or you got to get straight B pluses, you got to, I don't know what you guys use here, whatever the thing is. But it's like there's this idea that like you got to be really good at everything. No! Be really, really good at 20% of your classes, and the rest of them don't actually matter. How many of you have got an assignment, like a paper you're supposed to write, and you realize, okay, I got 3 days to finish this thing. I could get a good grade, or I could learn something useful, but I can't do both. How many of you have had that? Pick the learn something, not the grade. Because you're cheating yourself for a number that nobody will ask you about after you leave school. I've been out of school since 1992. Nobody has asked me my GPA. It was 3.15. Doesn't matter. I was an electrical engineer. And man, I fought like tooth and nail to get the 3.15. It didn't, what mattered was a few projects that I worked on and a few professors. This is true of professors. 5% of your professors are 50% of the influence of the good that you got out of college. You come to college, you get one professor and you love them and they love you and you really connect and they believe in you and they open doors for you, more valuable than everybody else put together. Come to college and find one professor who's really awesome and like annoy them in a good way. Next question. And you're gonna have to tell me how much time you have.
We've got about 5.
Okay. Who else? Yeah, Bob.
Sorry. Is there a nexus, like passion and what you're good at and what can come back that you've come across? Like people focusing on, like you said, what's that, you know, the grade versus something that's interesting. In business, do you see people following a passion and then putting more time and effort into it, or sometimes they're chasing the wrong thing?
Okay, so I think there's this big Venn diagram, and it's like, this circle is like what I'm passionate about. And then you got this other circle, which is what people will actually pay money for or hire people to do or whatever. So I don't think, if somebody says, just follow your passion, like, that's a good recipe for playing guitar in the tube with people throwing change in it and like barely staying alive, okay? I think you should find something that people will pay money for, that you are passionate about, that you can really get into, and not have any shame or guilt whatsoever about, I'm going to deliver the goods and I'm going to get the check, and the check is going to give me the freedom to pursue my other passions. So if I want to play guitar in coffee shops for free because it's fulfilling, that I can afford to do it, and I don't care if anybody's throwing money in the case or not. I think that's how you balance the world is not interested in your personal fulfillment, okay? And you need to just be okay with that. You need to, okay, somebody woke up this morning and they have a problem. Solve their problem. Just solve it, okay? And they'll write you the check. And if you're good at solving problems, then you'll get you can take the holidays you want to take, or you can go on the excursions that you want to go to. You can do the interesting things that you want to go to. And if you manage your time 80-20, you'll actually have the time to go do that stuff. 80-20, so normal way of thinking is life is so short and time is so precious. 80-20 says everybody who says that wastes 80% of their time. There's plenty of time to do not everything you want to do in your life. There's plenty of time to do the 5% of what you want to do in your life that's 50% of all the satisfaction that you can pursue. There's enough time for that. So I think we're done. All right? Thank you, everybody. I can answer some questions afterwards. It's really great talking to you today. Thank you.